Everybody for coming and spending some time with us. We are at the digital classroom, so we're going to talk about the digital classroom, what it means to be to utilize technology within the classrooms themselves, and see what ways that we can use the Casper suite to help the administrators that are administering the digital classroom and provide some tools on top of that. My name is John Miller. I'm one of the product managers here with Jamf Software, and excited to talk a little bit about this. We have a couple different sessions spread out across the JNUC about kind of different stories similar to this that me and the other folks that are on the product management team were thinking, oh, we should tell those stories. Those are great stories and kind of stuff that we're hearing. And then I found out that we have really good resources like Dave here, who spent time in instructional technology, knows way more about this, and can talk a lot quicker about it than I can as well. So brought Dave to kind of do all the work for me. And so he's going to do the bulk of the presentation and just talk a little bit about the digital classroom, what it means to embrace this technology, ways that we can utilize a few different things within our classrooms and really help forward learning and kind of move that through. So off to you, Dave.
Great, thanks, John. Talk quicker doesn't mean I'm going to talk fast. I'm going to try to keep my pace going. We're going to try to cover a lot of information, just kind of give an overview of some of the big topics going on out in education, and then tie those back into the digital classroom and how Casper Suite it helps with that. What I'm curious on is, who do we have in here that's going to intimidate me that was or is a former or current classroom teacher? Awesome. So you're in the digital classroom. I've been in the digital classroom since the late 80s. And so this is really what's the digital classroom today and what's going on with some of the things there. And as I mentioned, we're going to cover some topics kind of initially, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into them related to Casper, and particularly Casper Focus, and how those hopefully can help with that. So I'm curious on a few things as we go forward with what you're familiar with, because for the last 3 years since I left my school district, and I was a classroom teacher, I turned an IT integrator for a few years, and then I became a library technology director out in Arizona and in Maine. And in Jamf, we like to try to say we're nobody from nowhere, but to level set the experience, I stepped out of my school district in 2010 and went to work for Texas Instruments in a product strategy role, where I met with customers around the world, mostly in one-to-one situations and iPad situations, and was learning on what they were dealing with compared to what I've experienced. And I also got to finally go to conferences, because every year I would plan to go to conferences, and of course our budget was either frozen or I used the funds I had set aside to send somebody else. So it's great that you get to come to this. I had to leave my district to finally go. But I've been going to conferences, and there's been several topics over the last 3 years that have been pretty much a strand at every single one of them. And we're going to go over some of those focal points, and certainly why the digital classroom, and why people, what are the motivations that people are currently using to get in there. And we're going to relate these focal points to the students and how they're embracing it, the teachers on how they are embracing it, perhaps compared to the past, and how the IT are embracing it, and also how it maybe affects all of those. And as we mentioned, we're going to really wrap into how the Casper Suite also fits in with these different discussions, these different focal points out there in the educational community. And I left my copies of Ed Week and Leading and Learning with Technology, but I think if you pick up pretty much any one of those, any monthly issue or so, you're going to find some of these topics. And I'm curious whether or not later if there's some of the same ones you are experiencing. So before we get too far into this, there's a lot of motivating factors going in right now to why people are moving, to this new digital classroom. And as I mentioned, some of us have been doing this, or involved in this anyways, as a teacher since the late 80s and early 90s. And there are new motivating factors out there or driving it. And some districts are choosing, they're going the student performance route. They really see this as a pedagogical advantage and a way to improve students' learning and thus students' lives. Some are going about it more of a monetary, school board is dictating you need to cut things, and we're going to, maybe this is a way to do it. And having researched and visited quite a few iPad and I'm going to speak specifically to iPad adoptions, and what were their motivating factors. this one really jumped out at me because they covered everything. And certainly you hear that thing about facilitating teacher and student communication, the idea of an enhanced learning tool, but this reducing the volume of textbooks, this one and if you read another article from a district or some other district, you'll find out that the school board may or may not have been really into wanting to save money on the textbooks, and certainly doing all of this, I guess if it jumps out without increasing the district's budget to computer technology. That kind of sums some things up. And that certainly could then direct how focused they are to actually what's going on in the classroom once they choose what type of technology they're using. Are they choosing the technology based on what they wanted to do, or are they coming in after the fact because their motivations may have been more on the monetary? So of the focal points we're seeing, and I realize how many people are here from Minnesota? Okay. Now, while you may not be part of one of the two consortiums, Smarter Balance, but you are working on standards. And you are working on trying to provide standards across the curriculum for students, and you are working towards doing digital assessments. So really, one of the big topics for 3 years now has been whether or not you're doing Common Core state standards or are you doing some type of online assessment. And with those type of online assessments, you're hearing about whether or not the schools are ready for it, and you're doing your readiness checklists. And the motivating factors for some of this, on one side, could certainly be the being able to have, getting the data quickly and being able to react to it, maybe having things be more efficient. But at the same time, we've got this ability to provide different learning styles and evaluate students with different types of tests and these enhanced question types. And being able to do that can really change the way we look at students and what they're learning. So basically, the concept of digital assessments are out there. The iPad, that would be the other strand if you've been to any conference in the last 3 years, and I don't need to get into that one, but pretty much if you walked in, we had a great session yesterday. Joe talked about how he was implementing them in your school district. If you go to some other conferences, unfortunately, some of them are my favorite top 10 free apps. I don't mean that, sorry. I would like them to change the discussion to my favorite apps that improve student learning, rather than just my favorite free ones. That's all I'd like. I'd like to see more of an evaluation of apps. But that strand is out there. You've also got personalized learning. Now, differentiated instruction was what we were doing in the 2000s, whether it's the flipped classroom. The bottom line is we are trying to take a look at meeting needs of specific children, specific students. This is not really new, because we've had something like anytime, anywhere education in marketing for years. The real big difference here is the pace. The fact that we're now going to focus on students' pace, anytime, anywhere, and at any pace that student needs. And what technologies are out there that can help us do that. Because as a child who repeated second grade, day 2050 of your life, you don't necessarily need to be learning this topic. What topic did I need to be learning that I was ready for? And if we can get to that, and if technology can help, we can meet students' needs. And it's not so much about the fact I love trucks, and every problem story I should get should be about trucks, and one leaving New York when the different one's leaving Chicago, and one, it's really about what I'm ready to learn, and can our technologies help us with that? So later when I get into the Casper Focus and some other things, I'm going to come back to these topics. BYOD, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's been one of the 4 big topics at any conference. Over the last couple years, all of a sudden you started hearing, and when they had a Common Core assessment or digital assessment workshop, instead of in isolation, they started saying, oh yeah, we've now approved iPads. So all those people that were deploying iPads were wondering, will I be able to use them when we go to digital exams, when we do the Common Core? And they heard those answers that yes, you were. And they started having dual conversations rather than in isolation. Personalized learning. How can I do that on a tablet or a device? And assistive technology programs and seeing kinds of software that actually meet the needs of the students. And when you think about those apps, think about the apps that actually give students the opportunity to practice all alternate forms of assessment. You know, instead of just marking off an answer, you actually get to manipulate a number line. Okay? You actually get to manipulate shapes and determine, you know, fractions, for instance, and come up with an answer. Well, if that's what the Common Core State Standard exams are going to be like with these enhanced question types, we need to be giving students the ability to practice this on a daily basis. So with the iPads and the implementation, now they're talking about related to Common Core. Can we have these things related? And BYOD, you know, certainly the iPads are a big part of that discussion and how people are using them in schools, and now how are they trying to do something where you're providing one type of device to a student and another student's bringing a different device. And I'm really going to want to get into how right now in 2013 we're starting to talk about these topics not in isolation, but as a group. They're actually talking about how do we use the iPads to perform Common Core or standardized testing, and how do we promote you know, you don't throw a kid into a lab and if your answer, if your answer is for testing, we're going to set up a lab and we're going to bring the kids to it once a year and they're going to take that exam because we're doing, they're using any old device in the classroom, how do they prepare for that exam? How do they walk in and know how to handle this problem that's a multi-step problem with some kind of enhanced question type if they've never experienced it? And in my experience growing up, I didn't get what every other kid had. I wore canvas Chuck Taylors. Every other kid on my basketball team had leather Nikes. I drove a big Dodge King Cab truck. Every other kid was driving a Volvo or something else. My parents gave me what they could provide for me. Today, if I had the Chuck Taylors and I had a big old truck, I'd be pretty set in most high schools in Texas where I live. Back then, I didn't make it to varsity, you know, and honestly, if I'm not providing equity to the kids when they get to go to that Common Core exam later on down the road, did each kid get the same experience to have personalized learning? Or was it dumbed down to what they could do? And honestly, looking ahead at what we're about to talk about, how do we provide those things to students so they can all experience the enhanced learning that we can do through personalized learning that can then be evaluated? I'm getting off this, and I see the time. I'm going to really try to get into going into Casper Focus now, and I'm going to bring back these topics as we go. But I'd like to know real quick, and I know a lot of people are here in Minnesota, it's about online assessment. Is it a significant topic in your district? Is it a topic of discussion? Is it where the money's at right now? Oops, I didn't fall in the water, but I fell in the sand. It's not a concern. It's not influencing decisions in your district. Nobody really is paying attention about digital online assessments. And then, do I have another one? And not sure if it's important in my district or not. It's not in my role. I really don't know. I'm curious right now on whether or not online assessment is something you're seeing impact in your district. And I'm just going to let that run because I'd like to get that information for us for later. If you don't mind putting that in, if you want to go in later, the 2233. And if that doesn't, I'm going to worry about the results later. But in most cases, of 45 states of all adopting Common Core state standards, and even Texas and Minnesota is doing, and is it AIR? What is the big assessment in Minnesota? AIR? Okay, so we're working towards them. Went through this, found out I had a couple extra clicks going on. I usually get click happy, so I add a few extra in so I don't get off task. So digital classroom, some of the opportunities, and I'm going to go through this a little quick. Different kind of classroom. We didn't have bean bags. Although I did use a science lab when I was in school, now we're setting up rooms, making sure they have electricity for kids to plug in. We're starting to redefine how our classrooms are set up. Instead of getting kids in trouble for not showing up with their battery charged, we're providing places for kids to plug in. Electronic whiteboards, they're in classrooms all over the world. I'm going to bring this back later about how widely they're being accepted when you start talking about how teachers are accepting and adopting digital classrooms. The idea of getting beyond some of the early adopters. In my last district, going to the school board and saying I'd like to change out the furniture to pub style was the wrong phraseology. I would like to suggest cafe-style furniture in your library. So kids are meeting and working in unique places. A picture of the one place with all the beanbags, that is a classroom where teachers are bringing kids in. I don't have some pictures of the kids I have. I don't have that permission. This is my daughter, so I have permission. She learns till 3 in the morning using YouTube. It's anywhere, any place at their pace. Being able to pause, rewind, play again, those kind of features to the technologies the kids are accessing is really important. That idea that we're out of the classroom, I guess, is something we really have to have on our mind. And on that note of kids and how are they embracing the technology, that has never been an issue. I don't know that it's ever been an issue in the last 25 years getting students to embrace the technology. I'm not showing a video here, but if anybody afterwards still doesn't believe that students can create amazing, worthwhile things on an iPad, I do have some videos to show. It was one of the things I showed to the Texas Instruments people when they didn't want to make an app because they didn't think students were really, it was a, it was a consumption device only. But seeing kids and making what they can do on iMovie and things like that, and having this young man tell me that he used to go to the computer lab and now he does it all on his iPad. Just a couple of those videos for me show that kids are totally embracing it. There hasn't really been that much of an issue. They want at their pace though. And I've probably said that a bunch of times. It's giving them the ability to do it at their pace when they're ready for it. Is probably the biggest key of what we can do for them. Now, how are teachers embracing it? You know, there's pioneers. There's people who are going to try anything. You've got the early adopters who, if they fail, they get back and they try it again. I joked once I had a group of second graders and I threw my hands up and I joked about we should just leave, and they're like, no, let's try it again. And I said, yeah, this is the whole, and this was 98 or something. You know, embrace the technology, accept it. However, we do have a segment, and they are gifted and talented and highly qualified educators. I purposely left my classroom to support them because while I was an early adopter and I was trying everything, I knew that it wasn't really right to place that burden on them without support. However, quite often, they can be very comfortable in their niche and we're just going to wait this deployment out. Spent 4 years in Maine with some middle school teachers who just were going to wait that deployment out, and then finally we renewed it again and they're like, they got on board. Since I started working in educational technology, I tried to apply the principle, instead of focusing on, I never say his name right, Pareto, that 80-20 rule. We spend so much of our time, we spend 80% of our time supporting 20% of the users. We spend 80% of our time supporting the teachers. We've got 20% of our teachers doing these amazing things. You invite me to your school, you're probably going to want to show me that teacher who's doing this amazing thing. I'm going to ask you to please show me the teacher you think is reluctant to using technology, because I'm going to learn more from them. And I go and I want to see their classroom and see how we can help them. They're that group. There's a great book we have here at TI that we all read called Crossing the Chasm. And it's about how to reach that. And after 20 years of instructional technology and trying to do digital testing since the 90s, trying to do personalized learning, and trying to do tablets. I had a Cassiopeia, that's probably back whenever. I tried to do a grant in like 1997 to do handhelds in a classroom, and it was crazy. These aren't that new, but how do we get it beyond you all, honestly, that are in this room? And for me, it isn't about focusing on some of the other things that we hold near and dear, student learning, student achievement. It saved me time, make my life less chaotic. And quite frankly, if a classroom teacher right now has 33, oh, I had 33 kids, 20-something, iPads in their classroom, and they want to get the class's attention on a formative assessment tool as you walk into class, instead of flicking the lights, instead of waiting for every kid to finally sit down and keep your stopwatch going, and trying, instead they're logging in, and as you're coming into my class, since you're supposed to be in Edmodo, since you're supposed to be turning in your homework, and I've done a formative assessment question, and without having to wait for every kid, you've been pushed into Edmodo. Let's see, where am I at right now? So the teacher's logged in. They don't normally have to put in the server. They've logged in. They've gone ahead. They're going to go ahead and pick the app they want the kids to go into. I gave myself extra time to talk, and I'm trying not to waste it. So, save me time, make my life less chaotic. We have been giving teachers things that take them more hours in the night. Send me 300 emails and have to read every single one. I used to sit and watch my daughter do ballet and grade math papers. You know? Now I have to look at the computer. I want the kids to turn in their homework. I want to ask a formative assessment question. I'd have to go, excuse me, everybody go get the clicker over there on the counter. Or, excuse me, can you please go to this website? I want to ask you a question. No, I push you to the app, you're in Edmodo, you turn in your homework, you answer my question, I'm at my computer, I see you've turned in your homework, but you haven't, and then I go ahead and I free up you, but you're still locked in Edmodo. I have saved that teacher, the most chaotic minutes of the day are the first 5 to 10 minutes of any class. Anytime you want to get the kids' attention, and the last 10 minutes of class, or last 5 minutes of class. In my case, the last 30 seconds when I went, oh, we got to go, and then the bell's about to ring. So for me, that is meeting the needs of the slightly gifted and talented, highly qualified, but reluctant to using technology. Now, the thing is, personalized learning isn't about every kid on every app right now. We're not talking control here. We're not, you will be on for the next 45. It's, I got your attention, now I moved on. Let's say I did a formative assessment question. Lo and behold, I now realize 20 kids, or hopefully 5 kids, don't get it. That freaks me out. What do I do? Well, I'm going to go ahead and use grouping. So I can either select one student, the whole class, or now, thanks to the new version, I can go ahead and select just a couple students and push them to an app. And then I can go over and say, you guys, I want you to work on this, do these activities, and then I free them up and I walk away. But I'm able to either select a specific app, and I do love the new feature, and I did mean to use gratitude. Thank you. I went to conferences. There were 5 things every teacher that came up and saw Casper Focus wanted. 3 that we could control are in the new version. One of them is, if you have a list of 500 apps, you don't want to have to find TI Inspire by scrolling down. Now, thank you, TI, boom, it shows up. So if you have been looking at Casper Focus in the past, teachers can easily search. If you wanted to select multiple kids, thank you, John. The product team put in, you can do groups. So we listened, and of the 5 things that I heard, those 2 they were able to do. So getting kids into groups, now I can, instead of the whole class or just one, I can lock them in. I can go through. Now, again, not about control, but my kids are engaged. They are doing these great things, but I can't get their attention. Now, hopefully they're on task. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I could either go flick the lights. I could do my favorite one. Somebody knows the answer. Or I could, Mr. Salmarsh, you knew you're in trouble when you started talking really quietly. I never yelled. I just started whispering. And usually the kid off task would know it. But I want your attention. I simply flick everybody to an app that does nothing, which is a red light app. Every kid in my class looks up, hopefully, and I go, what's the deal? I say, hey, 10 more minutes, start wrapping up what you're doing, the homework's on the board, okay, go back to work. Now, how much time would that have taken? And what's the horrible part for me, because I feel the pain of the student that's sitting here, that I had their attention from the moment I went, and he's ready for what do we do next? And you know what? 30 seconds later, I'm going to go use proximity, and I'm going to get this. And meanwhile, they've just wasted 30 seconds of their instructional time. So instructional time is money. Go to the school, not school board. They used to care about seat time. What's the seat time in the computer lab? I'm trying to save time with technology. I'm going to measure how much time I've saved by the kids coming to class. And guess what? If that kid's in the hallway and he's talking to a buddy, he's on Edmodo. Okay? And he's going to realize I might as well get to class because he's not over there on some other app because he was scheduled for my class and I switched him over. So I've saved you time. Speaking of saving you time, sorry, this glass is where I am. So I've got your attention. Oh, near and dear to my heart, I'm a math teacher. I worked hours coming up with good distractors. It's like taking an Apple exam. They don't make easy multiple guess questions. There's like, what are the 3 ways to do something? Good distractors are, there's no gimme if I give you a multiple choice test. I don't want that test having taken a screenshot. I don't want that quiz being emailed to a buddy. And although I don't mind, because my distractors are hard, I don't want you going on the internet. So we've got math teachers or any type of teacher still doing paper pencil quizzes instead of digital because of concerns for security, compromising their exam, kids, getting extra help. Was this the right one? So daily quizzes. I don't know if I hit play. I'm sorry. The idea that I can pick an app and I can go ahead and select an app that is good for assessment, and I can push all the kids in it and they're locked in it. And they can't take a screenshot. In this case, I'm going to use TI Inspire. They're not going to email a buddy. And when they're done, what's nice is I can free up and Craig, when you are done with the quiz, I can free you up. Meanwhile, the rest of the class is still in it. And, I'm not going to freeze you in another app. I'm not about control. It's just for a few minutes, as a math teacher, I do need a little bit of control. Students say, an app that is multi-purpose, in case you're ever wondering about, can I lock into 3 apps at once? It is single app mode. It's guided access. And use apps that have multi-purpose, that have lots of things in them, like in an app that actually lets me go ahead and do an assessment that I can collect back. But in this example, the student sends me their answer, or their answers, I release them and I move on. So now you've solved that need for that teacher who wants to have a little control during their exam and why they are not using iPads in the classroom for assessments day to day. Because honestly, I am going to talk about high-stakes exams, but I'm about day-to-day stuff. I did quizzes and assessments throughout my class, weekly, all that kind of stuff. Most teachers are going to care about in their class every day. Administrations, I'm sorry, you're going to care about that once-a-year test. And that's important. Summative assessments are important. We also like to show up as teachers on Monday morning. And if we're going to meet the needs of students with personalized learning, and I realize I've got some students who are really engaged in a topic, I do not want to email tech support to please add an ebook to the list because I need to on the spot. Yes, I should think out what my unit is for 6 weeks, but personalized learning means I'm going to meet the needs today, at this minute of that kid. So going in, inside the new version, I can go in, I can go search under ebooks, go out to the store. This is a student, by the way, just to show you that they don't have this book at the moment in their self-service. The teacher searches for a book. It's free. If it's a free one, they can go get this. And they choose it. They assign it to the classes they want it, whether it's the night before, whether it's the weekend, whether it's right now, today, at whatever, 3:45 in the afternoon. And then minutes later, once that student refreshes over in their self-service, no, don't go to the apps, refresh. And when they refresh their textbooks, their books, refresh, thank you, that book is going to show up for the student. Seconds later, I've met that need of that student. That teacher has saved themselves time, they've saved IT time, and that student is getting what they need right then and there. And to me, that's valuable. That is what I've been trying to do for 20-something years. Okay, 20 years. Apple TV. I love Apple TV. I have one at home. We have them in our classrooms. You're finding buildings have them almost one-to-one for every room, every teaching space or instructional space, every meeting room. So I'm not forcing a kid. I can't go see what they're doing. But I'm going to say, again, save the teacher time, okay? Reduce chaos. If I want this person to project, I would have to get their attention. I might be able to get their attention. Then I say, hey, could you please project? Cool. Then they go find the Apple TV, and maybe you have them VLAN or whatever, however that technology works, and you have to pick from the list. Then they promote. Instead, the teacher goes, oh, cool, student's doing something really awesome. I want them to project. They go in. This kid's doing something really amazing. What is that? I need to see how they're doing this fraction thing. They pick the student, and they prompt them. From their device, they prompt the student. Student gets a little message. Please present. It may not say, please present. I'm ad-libbing that, John. I don't know what it says. I can't read that close. But they tap the button, and they're in AirPlay. And you're not going to see them anymore because I was using Reflector, and I was having a wonderful, fun time, demoing things. But now that student was immediately prompted. We've saved time. we are trying to simplify and make it easier for teachers. Not overcomplicate it, simplify their life in the classroom. And now, again, I didn't even have to get his attention. I prompted. He's looking at his iPad. Please present. What does it mean to IT? Well, I've been trying to work myself out of a job for about 12 years. I left my district. I handed it off to somebody who had no IT background. He was an instructional person. He's managing the IT department of my last school district. Most of the tasks being done in my last district are now being done in the library. Okay? My librarians were gifted and talented people who know databases. Who should be checking out laptops to students? Who should be putting apps into self-service for teachers to give to their students? So, how many people have done NWA testing? Okay, you've done NWA testing. A lot of touch. Getting around, setting those up, and having that testing go. Imagine simply putting a website as a whitelist in the JSS and assigning it to all the 8th grade who are about to do the testing. And then the teacher coming in and say, great, we're going to do the testing today, and it's web-based testing, and so I need you to go to a specific website and only a certain website. Well, the teacher locks them into Safari, and when the kid goes to Safari, because they're forced to, their device can only go to that one website. Now, maybe you want to use that for other reasons. You want to give, Johnny, you've lost all your privileges. You can only go to these 7 sites, and you're dropped into this group. But the main thing is the IT didn't have to run around to all those devices. They didn't have to run around to do the testing. They helped get the testing set up, and they're saving a lot of time and energy. And these are all the kinds of things you can look at, is the fact that IT doesn't necessarily have to be the boots on the ground for everything. I had this student go to the Jamf website, but when they want to see how much the Red Sox beat the Detroit by, and they try to go to Major League Baseball, they can't. But consider how much time and energy, if you've been doing NWA testing, that maybe will save you from running around and being the person to manage that. Resetting passcodes. Please do not look me in the eye and say, well, if that kid can't get on his iPad, that is a reasonable consequence. I guess they'll just not be able to use their iPad today. And that's a good consequence, right? Like, you give me a kid with 33 kids and one kid can't use his iPad today? I'm looking for you, okay? I'm going to scratch your eyes out. 1 student, 2 students in my classroom who cannot use their iPad is not a good punishment to me. So I need to be able to, from my iPad, simply go, you know, of course, if it's your 3rd time, we're going to have a conversation. Maybe if it's 2nd time, we'll have a conversation with your parent. I can deal with that, but don't make me wait a day to get this student to be able to do it. So a teacher simply being able to reset that passcode saved you a trouble ticket, saved IT having to show up and any time and energy whatsoever in resetting that passcode for that device. And then the student's back to doing their work. I'll handle the behavior issue if it is a behavior issue. You know, I can get sidetracked. I can forget what I was doing. And once in a while, the class ends and my kids leave. And I forget to unlock some kids. They probably deserve it, you know. However, they get to their next class. I tell you what, I lived in Maine. Please do not just give me my class period from 8:30 to 9:30. We have early release. We have snow days. The principal decides to have an assembly to raise money for whatever. So classes change. So if I simply put in 7 to 4 every day, I get, you know, and if it adjusts, I can control my classes. But if the kid goes to the next class and I forgot to unlock them, it's no worries. The next teacher opens up their class. They're going to see that the kid's locked and they can unlock them. Great for me is I usually had a special ed teacher working with me. And if I wanted to lock the kids into an app, she or he could switch certain students to certain apps. 10 minutes later, when I wanted their attention, I brought everybody back. She or he put the kids back in. So you can be in the same room with somebody else with Casper Focus, and they can move that. But think about the next teacher. If we, you know, if I don't want the kid to have certain filtering, it affects the next teacher. Well, if I block them for my class period, it doesn't affect the next teacher who needs that kid to get into this other app. Also at 4 o'clock when they go home, don't worry, the app it'll be dropped out of that and they'll be able to go back and do what they need to do. So that's not a significant thing and it's not requiring IT. And John Sorry, Johnny, I'm going to stop there. I kind of went over a whole bunch of stuff, tried to tap it back in to assessment. And the last thing for IT, sorry, I should have said, if you're looking for money, I was speaking to someone in Maine on Friday, and I just can't afford that per seat. You know, is there some way you can help us? And so, have you talked to your assessment team? And she goes, you know, we have a grant at our high school to improve teacher practice. And she's going to go back and she's going to use the grant that they just got at the high school for improving instructional practice to implement Casper Focus. So the message to IT is get these other people involved that have the money. They have it. Formative assessment, summative assessment is the biggest thing going, and they've got money. And it's not just for infrastructure, it's to improve teachers' practice. And if you want to finally see, after 20 years, reaching the success rate, my job depended on it. If my district failed after I implemented something, it will look bad on me. IT, you want things to succeed. The more teachers who embrace this technology, the better you look for making some decisions you made. And afterwards or later, if anybody wants to see Casper Focus or play with it, I can do a session out in the hall or something like that, and I appreciate your time. We got lots of times for questions and some time for John.
Yeah, we got we got about 10 minutes towards the end, and like he said, we can hang out and want to hang out and spend some time hearing some more things. An important part to think about this too is that Dave covered a lot of the application of these technologies. We're talking about ebooks, apps, Casper Focus with an iPad, and Apple TVs, all as one kind of put together piece of technology that's in the hands of our educators, right? So this idea of consumerization of IT management, I think a lot of people, consumerization of IT and blah, 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 but what does that mean for our actual educators when they can do this work themselves without generating the tickets and that sort of thing? So we have those technologies available through the Casper suite, but someone's an English teacher here is going to yell at me, so I'm going to use a different way. They are separate technologies that can be used together to form this type of thing. So whether we're looking at our K through 5 or primary school internationally, that type of thing, and we have students that are 5, 6, 7 up to maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, this type of control and guided access with Casper Focus is very effective and very helpful for educators. When we move that age group up a little bit, Casper Focus has similar things for able to do battery, like, hey, Dave, your battery's about to die, make sure you plug that in tonight before you come home. We can help there as well. When we get into the higher age groups and higher ed and kind of towards the end of our high school and moving into higher education and things like that, those technologies can still be used. You can still deploy ebooks and you can still get the apps down to the students and the tools that they need to learn the things that they need. You can still use an Apple TV and say, hey, these are the targets and the passcodes for those Apple TVs for you to do collaborative work within your classroom so that they don't have that giant long list of Apple TVs. All these technologies can be used individually or collectively as a part of whatever your specific workflows or frameworks are, and we're excited to hear some of that back. Whether that's in questions, people were throwing questions up over here, but as well later on through Jamf Nation, that type of thing. So questions?
So my understanding is that Casper Focus needs supervised.
Correct. The question, do we need supervision? Yes.
And so most of my iPads are family owned.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't set them up, I just have them enrolled.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any code that I'll be able to use this with those iPads?
Yeah, so the question for those of us that can't hear it and for the tape as we're going for future reference, devices needing to be supervised, and what that means is initial preparation when devices are family owned or kind of more of a BYO type thing utilized in the classroom. There is hope in the future for that becoming easier and more simple. Not too much more than that I can say. There are ways that we are able to take advantage of some new technology to make that easier, to help in a BYO or a institution provided for a year's time or a term's time type deployment scenario. Helpful? Sorry, I can't say too much more. Yeah.
You said there's a way to control the list of Apple TVs that come up?
Yes.
Instead of it being like, I don't know,
Yep.
air server, like 25 different platforms?
Yeah, exactly. So the question is, how do we control the list of Apple TVs or AirPlay targets that might show up on an individual iOS device. iOS 7, there's a new, for all intents and purposes, whitelist of AirPlay targets. Right now it's specific to Apple TVs and not AirPlay or Air server, reflector, some of those technologies. Monday night, that's more of the stuff that I was playing around with, is how do we get that device ID to be able to utilize that in that space. But you can manage your Apple TVs with the JSS. You can just enter that information as a configuration profile and deploy to the scope appropriately. So what we do at Jamf Software, we have something like 100 million Apple TVs just in our office. It's a joke. Thank you. We have probably 40 in each office, legitimately. And so what we can do is when I'm in Eau Claire, my device shows up on our subnet, it automatically deploys that configuration profile to that subnet, and I get the devices themselves as my target, so I see just the ones that are appropriate for me, right? So I'm not airplaying down to a support TV when they're doing whatever they need to do in that type of thing.
So in my classes, when somebody sets up my classes, or I do, it assigns it to that class. And if I teach the next class in a different room, then that next room could have that one assigned. And maybe you add another one, because sometimes I go into this auditorium, so that when I have that class up, there'll only be the Apple TVs we decided for them to see, which thus the students will only, instead of scrolling through 25, they're seeing 1 or 2.
So if you just Apple TV and iOS 7, even without Casper Focus, you can still do that.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So this is, Casper Focus takes advantage of this to be able to say, associate this Apple TV with this specific class, but you can do all this separate from Casper Focus. So you can define all your Apple TVs, you can define the credentials for those. One of the things that more in a commercial space that this is helpful is, hey, I've got 30 Apple TVs that I set up as an IT admin, and maybe this is helpful for higher ed as well. We don't necessarily want to say, here are the credentials in an email or a wiki to all those Apple TVs, and so we can just deploy those down to the devices. They just prompt it. They don't even know that there's authentication required, because they just see the stuff that they need. There's other questions over here. You're scratching your head. Any questions over here? Anybody? You got? Yeah.
Okay, so the teachers obviously have to have a way to log into Jamf, right? I assume there's a way, you said they could reset passwords, and obviously have control focus. How do we figure out how to do that? Is that listed in Jamf Nation? Or how do we figure out how to granularize? They can log in and do what we want them to do, but we don't want them to get in and look at inventory.
The login is only for Casper Focus. On the back end, you set up the classes. The teacher is assigned to a class. You scope out the students or the devices that are in that class. And so when the teacher logs in, it's only giving them Casper Focus. They see the list of courses next to that, and they pick the appropriate course for the students that are in the room. The access is all for what they do, it's all in the Casper Focus app. And
So passwords are in the Focus app now?
the passcodes are what we're resetting. Passcodes, not passwords for this. It's just the device passcode.
Is there a way to pull those passcodes? Is it Jamf Nation somewhere to pull those passcodes?
Yeah. So, the question is, and there's been a lot of resounding, how do we integrate with our student information systems, our SIS? So currently on Jamf Nation, there's an SIS importer. It's a free downloadable product. You can download it. It runs on a schedule type basis. The idea being most SIS solutions, like how PIN number, it's PIN, personal identification number. I don't know how to say SIS system without it being this. Anyways. So you export a text file from the SIS, and then the SIS importer will read from that on a schedule if we want, like to say every day or whatever. And it can either overwrite everything. It can do all the configuration to say, here are all my students in these classes. The use cases that we have, there's a checkbox to delete everything and rebuild. So if you have an off hours day, like a half day in service days, those types of things, you can just run it again, on demand and import all that stuff. Some of the things that we're looking at for future are direct integration into the SIS itself, but most of the feedback that we heard is the speed that we're able to run the SIS importer that's available for free today, and the ways that we can utilize that on our schedule is enough for the stuff that we have. There's, obviously edge cases and things like that, but I imported 30,000 classes in 17 seconds, so I think you can run that at night, hopefully.
Cool. And we may have to take questions offline. I'm not sure if there's another session coming in. Can someone give us a heads up on
Yeah.
that?
Luger, do we have a hard stop?
Certain. Yes, ma'am?
Quick question. You said you're recommending not to assign time to class, to give them a day to, like, the whole.
Practicality for myself, with the way our schools worked, it would not have worked to give a hard time. That would have been something that would have ended up interfering in instruction, and I would have had teachers sending in trouble tickets with that fact. I believe setting up a time and the days and all that and having the hours for the day of the school would probably be more appropriate. If you see that doesn't work, you can adjust it, but I would be more liberal with the amount of time you gave for that class than very restrictive. The only fear is, oh, what if the teacher locks them in? Well, any other teacher that can have access to that class can unfreeze them.
We got one up front here.
Oh, so, well, number one is locking the multiple apps. The thing is, it's single app mode, and I'm going to suggest we're not trying to lock kids into things. You're helping the teacher facilitate the classroom. It's another instructional tool. So don't look to try to keep kids focused in 3 apps for 45 minutes. So that was number one. Number two, you can lock them into Safari. Can you lock them into a specific web page? And I should mention that now with iOS 7, you can do it. Then there was groups. And we did that. I have them listed, and actually there were 4 things we were able to do because the websites, I just found out last week, I got pretty excited that we can support that. Searching, the apps, the idea that what if I have 500 apps in my JSS and my 4th grader teacher doesn't need to look through all the high school apps? Well, because we have the search feature, that teacher can now do it. And then the 5th one was the ability to get on the fly ebooks and distribute that on the fly as opposed to emailing tech support. We can't do the apps at the moment. I believe that's when we get capabilities from Apple, we jump on them. So of the 4 that we could do something about, they actually did. And please send me your next ones. I am out there trying to meet with teachers and educators. What's the next thing? Not 5, but what's the one thing that's really going to help that classroom teacher who's hesitant? So we're wrapped up. I'll be out there if somebody has questions, and I'd love to hear it. If you have any experiences, I'd love to hear it. We have a panel tomorrow at 9 a.m. that have some people that have been using it. They're going to talk about their experiences.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.